Hello everyone and welcome. In this video we're going to be reviewing the horror thriller film X. It was directed by T. West, spelled T-I, and just the last name West. What is this guy, Kanye West's brother? What the hell? Anyways, he's had a lengthy career in the horror thriller genre, and a slight side note, I've noticed when studying the filmography of these directors, writers, screenwriters, and whatnot, I find that they seem to mainly work in the horror thriller film genre and nothing else. Many talented directors, or I should say ambitious directors, will actually take the risk to direct many different genres and types and styles of film. You know, directors will take on projects in comedy, dramas, thrillers, romance, I think like animated movies and whatnot, sci-fi even. But horror people know. They always seem to incompetently stay in the same genre, and I just find that interesting, especially throughout all my studies. Going back to the film X, it was also written by the director T. West. The cinematography was done by Elliot Rocket, edited by David Kashevarov, and again, T. West is heavily involved in both the editing, the writing, and directing of this film, so if there's any negative or positives in this film, you could totally put it on him. The music was done by Tyler Bates and Chelsea Wolfe, and was produced by companies Little Lamb and Mad Solar Productions. The film was distributed by A24, a very reputable film production and distribution company who's made pretty decent works. Little shame they made this one. Now, the film had a budget of $1 million, which is really low scale, and it does show. It did have a box office of $14.5 million, which is just decent. I do hope this film lost some people money to teach them a lesson not to make movies like this again. Another side note, I've noticed with the slowdown of theater attendance given this false pandemic, the production companies are spending far less money than they used to when producing films, and naturally so, but damn does this hurt the industry and the fan base. As usual, I'll go over the cast and then a quick summary before reviewing the film, and then possibly going into more spoilers of the film, talking about things I like and didn't like about the film. The film stars Mia Goth as Maxine Minx, Jenna Ortega as Lorraine Day, aka Church Mouse, Brittany Snow as Bobby Lynn Parker, Scott Cudi, aka Kid Cudi, as Jackson Hole, Martin Henderson as Wayne Gilroy, Owen Campbell as R.J. Nichols, among others. So, quick summary, the film takes place around the Texas area. It's about these young adults, these young kids, looking to make money and stardom in the adult video home porn industry. One of the kids in the crew is oddly interested in making an artistic porn video, whatever the hell that means. So they go ahead and rent out a room at an old farmer's house. It's a farmer couple, it's a man and a wife, and they rent a room to make the porn there, and that's pretty much where the drama ensues and builds up until a climax. Pretty much that's it. So that's a very brief and concise summary. Now I'm going to go ahead and briefly review the film, talk about my opinions and spoilers a little bit later on in the video. So in terms of writing, it's pretty much boring, and before I continue, I gotta say it's horror films like this that make me not like the horror thriller film genre. It's very boring, it's not scary, and overall pointless. But I will reserve any harsher judgments for a little bit later on in the video when I talk about spoilers, so moving on. So most films have like a meaning, symbolism, backdrop, underlying themes. This film fails to do any of that. It's a horror film, so maybe it's just focusing on that and throws everything else out the window. The writers, they make an attempt to discuss the moral implications of having someone you love in the porn industry, but it doesn't go much farther than just mentioning it and that someone has a problem with it in the crew. That's pretty much it. So this happens, and then right after, they just go ahead and ask if they can join, totally abandoning their morals without any character development or changes in their behavior at all. I find that odd, just lazy. Overall, the writing is bad, with only a few bits of good dialogue and confrontation among the actors. Moving on to the cinematography, which is one of the main things that was decent in this film. I stress the word decent. I mentioned earlier this film was directed and edited by the same guy, so his vision is heavily influenced in the making of this film and every shot, which is overall just mediocre. I gotta say, if you were to contract some lowly camera worker and he had some slight ambition to him and you used him to film this movie, you'd get pretty much the same results. There's nothing fancy in any of the camera work throughout this film. Very plain Jane type stuff, and that's pretty much it with the cinematography. The editing is only decent. Again, I stress the word decent. And the only bit of editing that I found cool or interesting in any way or added any bit of suspense or interest was when the scene would toggle back and forth from the next scene to the scene that's taking place before finally settling on that scene. Even then, that's nothing crazy and only barely mentionable. Moving on to the acting, I gotta say that's actually one of the best parts of this film. Everyone did a pretty good job of acting and looking very believable, flowing naturally with their assigned characters, so pretty good on that end. This actually makes me wish they had better writing to see these actors actually have something more to work with so that we could actually see them, you know, kind of act out more fleshed out personas. But of course, the writing is only decent, and so we only see their good acting for what it is and what they had on hand. If I were to crown those who did the best acting in the film, I'd say it goes to Mia Goth, Brittany Snow, and Kid Cudi. Overall, just a decent film. I would never watch it again, and I'm very glad I didn't pay any money to watch it. I would recommend watching it if you had absolutely nothing else to do. If you want to see a mediocre horror film, go ahead, go at it. But other than that, I really don't recommend watching it. Just a waste of time. There are much better horror films out there for you to watch and enjoy. And that's just my overall honest opinion after reviewing the film. Now I'm going to be moving on to a spoiler segment, so you guys have been warned. I did enjoy some shots. For instance, the shot where the alligator early in the film is chasing Mia, or what is it, Mia Goth or Maxine Minx, is kind of cool. But only that, just kind of cool. There's a little bit of suspense added to that, but it's a very base suspense. Like oh, an animal is stalking someone. Of course, that's suspenseful to some degree. But that's it. I did enjoy some of the editing and special effects that took place in this film. Two scenes that stand out the most to me with good execution were the scene where Lorraine's character, played by, what's her name, Jenna Ortega, she's kind of trapped somewhere and she's reaching her hand out to kind of get the lock and try to escape, and her hand gets banged up by a hammer when trying to escape. I found it arousing. I mean, very, very entertaining to see her actually endure that and it get busted up so bad. It's interesting to see how they played out and how her hand seemed to maintain anatomical movement also while getting hit very hard. I don't know if that's a mixture of special effects, makeup work, perhaps even CGI, but overall well execution in that. The next scene that was done really well was when that alligator or crocodile, whatever the hell, scary dinosaur lizard killed Bobby Lynn's character. A very good shot of her getting eaten. Really good work. That was very thrilling to watch, but just that thrilling. It wasn't like in a horror element at all. You're just like, damn, what a horrible thing to happen to someone to just get eaten by an alligator or dinosaur scary lizard in the middle of the night. So that's about it for the things I actually enjoyed in the movie. Moving on to things I really don't like. First thing, I want to spoil the killers in the film. It's just an old farm couple. That's it. It's an old couple of people who are like above 75. So it's not like, oh, just someone in their late 50s, 60s, early 70s. No, these people are like frail, okay? They're very, very old, have a hard time seeing, doing any chores for themselves. They can't even really cook or clean for themselves, yet they're surviving. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know how these are the antagonists of the film. Another thing I find very odd and ridiculous is that it's just a horny-ass grandma. She has some sort of jealous temperament towards the young adults who have their youth, who are enjoying sex casually, and because of this, she becomes a violent murderer. There's no backstory to her having any insane elements to her character, so this just makes no sense. It's boring, it's cliche and gross and pathetic overall. And we don't really know what she does with the bodies or the couple, what they do when they die. We just see them kind of hung up in one scene. We have no idea if she has sex with the bodies or if she like moves them around for reasons we have no idea. On a personal side note, I think the mishandling of dead bodies is absolutely hilarious. Necrophilia is so funny to me, as well as being like beating an already dead body. I always, when I see that on film or media, I just crack up laughing. I have no idea why, because it's such a pointless endeavor. Or let's say like you prop up a dead body of someone who you know their spirit wouldn't want that happening to them. Like you dress them up in thong and lingerie or whatever, and you prop them up in a room. I don't know, just stuff like that I find funny rather than scary, but that's just me. Going back to the antagonist, I really hate the antagonist of this film. I think it's really stupid, and I mean really stupid. Come on, a horny grandma murderer? Come on, dude. That's absolutely terrible. The whole movie sounds like some high school kid or college student came up with it as an attempt of a horror movie that somehow actually got made. I mean, decent overall, but totally not worth the watch. Going back to them discussing the implications of having someone you love or are partners with acting in the porn industry, it was overall a very weak argument. They kept talking about how it's just acting, it doesn't really mean anything, when it's simply not the case. Sex is a sacred act you perform with your partner and your partner alone. It's just Plain and simple, no way around that. They try very little to rationalize it in any meaningful way. This is brought up when all of them are in a room together after finishing a scene. This is when Church Mouse or Lorraine speaks up against that and then suddenly says she wants to be in porn for no reason and no character change or development at all, which again I find very weak and odd overall. There are also religious elements decorated throughout the film that have absolutely no business being there. They do very little to mention them in any meaningful way or touch up on them, and it's just pretty pointless. The film has no message at all and is even then only a mediocre horror film, and the ending is so laughably bad. So there are two end pieces to this film. Okay, one thing happens where they escape, and then the last is like the very last lines of dialogue before cutting to credits. One is where Maxine survives the old couple and ends up getting defeated. They end up getting defeated in the simplest ways. For instance, the old couple, one of them just gets a heart attack. So there's no like outward effect or event happening to them. They just get a heart attack and they just die. So that's just like they're that old. They're susceptible to heart attacks at any moment. And you know, he was frightened very briefly and then suffered a heart attack and then died on the spot. And the other lady, the old lady who's of the couple, just breaks her hip. She falls and breaks her hip and then dies, or at least would have been left to die had Maxine's character not backed up over her head in a truck and then sped off. So that was kind of cool, decent ending. The antagonist just overall very weak, not just in character, but in the reality of this film being just an old couple. Oh my gosh. Now, before I move on, I gotta say there are no horror elements in this film at all. You're not filled with fright or fear in any way. You're only filled with a sense of uncomfortableness and like kind of grossness and uneasiness that comes from being around old people. And I mean really old people, not just old people, but very old people like I mentioned in this film. You know, I get it. Old people are like walking corpses, and that's what makes them to be uneasy to be around, especially when they're this old. But that's it. That's what the whole film is about. There's no jump scares that are meaningful or very scary. It's just the fact that there are old people walking around killing people. That's it. So going back to the two ending pieces, talking about Maxine first, she survives them and is driving in a pickup truck before doing a bump of coke and saying, "Praise fucking Christ," or something like that, which has no meaning, is not a cool catchphrase, and just doesn't contribute to the film in any way. I have no idea why they decided to end on that. Her character is uninteresting, not valuable at all, and just, what? Oh my gosh. Just incredibly pointless and laughably bad. The second and final ending piece is even more laughably bad and embarrassing, man. So it's the cops that do nothing, and I truly mean absolutely do nothing. Not just in the movies, but in reality, cops are just absolutely useless. Not to get too political or reality check your ass in any way, but these cops, going back to the film, these cops are analyzing the aftermath of these murders, and one of the cops says to the chief, he's like, look, I found one of these cameras these kids must have had. Look, here it is. And he gives them to the chief. And I kid you not, these are the last lines of these characters before the film cuts black to credits. You know, there's nothing else other than this. This is exactly what they say. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but this is what they say. "What do you think is on it, chief?" And he pauses for a brief moment before saying, "Some kind of fucked up horror movie." Literally, that's what he says, as if that's supposed to mirror the film in any way when the film itself is terribly mediocre. I just found that laughably bad. Not to mention, the camera is never used to record any of the murders in any way at all. The camera was only used to record them doing their like pornography or whatever. So these cops are just going to be sitting around watching porn, not solving the crime? Yeah, that sounds about right. But oh my gosh, man, what a waste of time. As mentioned earlier, it's horror films like these that make me never want to watch horror films at all for their bad writing, mediocre style, and lackluster scares. Overall, a decent movie. I don't want to harp on it any more than I have already. I don't recommend you guys watch it. I just want to put the trauma of watching this film behind me, to be honest. I think others agree with me since most Google users rate the film at a 60% or below, as well as IMDb rating the film at 6 out of 10, and with some sites giving it higher praise. But other than that, just a very mediocre film. Because of how bad this film was and how bad I don't want to review any more horror films, I believe this will be the last horror film that I'm going to be reviewing for the month of October. I know there's a lot more. Maybe I'll do one more, but darn it, do I hate watching horror films. They're so boring, mediocre, pointlessly scary. Some of them are. I'm not saying all of them are, but a majority of them just suck. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, and always, you're the best. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.